Okay, and welcome to the Q model. My name is Paul Gossen, and today I'm going to begin with a really simple question, which is how can you transform the results of a team or a company? Seems like a really basic question, but this question is the question upon which the entire Q model system was developed. So let's say you're a business leader or a CEO, you manage a company, and perhaps you're considering a digital transformation or a strategic transformation, or more likely, you've already started some kind of project, and for some reason the project is going slower than expected. So the Q model is a very clearly and articulately designed system to produce the most efficient breakthrough in those circumstances. So anytime we deal with Q, we always deal with three basic elements. So we've got our three corners of the Q model right here. And we'll start to outline those three corners and three really basic questions. Now, of course, the entire premise of the Q model is something that is practical, simple, and usable. So please forgive me if I don't sound like a PhD leadership dissertation. In one corner, we have a really simple concept, which is trust. And you could say that trust is a foundation for every company. People need a basic level of safety and security on which to build anything. And so the level of that safety and security is a key enabler or inhibitor of any kind of organizational breakthrough or transformation. So our first corner is always a breakthrough in trust. And you could also define this as current state, which is the question, where are we at right now? Which again is just the most simplest question in the world. So this is the corner of current state. And this begins us on our journey up toward desired state. Now, in the domain of desired state, we are talking about, a very simple question. What do we want to achieve? What is the result or goal we want? But this triggers a deeper quality, which for the purpose of Q, we will call vision. So vision is really the key to high performance in an organization, in a team, in a strategic project. Being able to design and bring out a vision of success is really one of the magic capabilities of the Q model. Then, as with any good business, we must have action. Now, the problem is most people are busy. You could say that humans are governed by a lack of time. So in any organization, people are running around doing stuff. But the question is, how much of that stuff is the key action that will generate or move forward that strategic breakthrough in results that the organization is looking for? So we're not just talking about action. We're talking about a kind of focused action that is in alignment with the vision. So you could also think of action as a state, just as you can have a state of trust or a state of vision. You can also have a state of action, which we're going to call 100% committed. So you could think of that as the state of yourself or a team or a group of executives being 100% committed to the action and the result. Now, so far this seems very simple. And Einstein says if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it yourself. So there is a certain mastery in simplicity. But I really promise you as well that below these questions, there's a very deep system that is intricate and will deliver a state of high performance results into any team or organization. But look, you should be skeptical. That's something you have to figure out yourself. Does Paul know what he's talking about? Just a little bit about myself. I started as a CEO coach in around 1999. At that point, I really had a passion for taking all my years as an entrepreneur and focusing on the subject of innovation, which was kind of a buzzword in the late 90s. But as I started working as a coach, and especially coaching CEOs and top executives, I noticed that there were certain questions. If you ask those questions, it would create a shift in the thinking. And so over the last 17 years, we modeled out all those questions and turned them into a process. And we've since used that process in really dozens and dozens of large company transformation projects, but also small startup and entrepreneur-based projects. And so it's a real honor to be able to share these questions with the world. Okay, so back in the corner of trust, we're working with current state. And this is a really interesting idea. The golden rule of the Q model is that trust comes from open dialogue of the current state, which is kind of a funny idea. Often we think of trust in a binary way. You either trust someone or you don't trust someone. So it's useful to start to shift that into a levels. So you could think of a scale, and the scale could go from 1 to 10. And at 1 is a low level of trust, and 10 would be a very high level of trust. And so you could think in a project cycle, say at the beginning of a project cycle, you have a very clear plan and a very clear goal. So then your trust in the project's success or your trust in the team would be relatively high. But then you're getting into the project and, invariably, as all projects are designed for, you hit some big challenges. Look, if you're not doing something that is significant and meaningful, you will never hit challenges. So if you're taking on a company transformation or a strategic transformation, you're going to hit problems and challenges. So inevitably, when you hit those problems and challenges, there's a point where you or the team can't really see a solution. So you can see at that point, the level of trust is going to go down. There's the point of challenge where it just seems as if there's no solution, or that there's a conflict in priorities, or a lack of resources, time, money, solutions, talent, or some other barrier that is blocking the forward movement of this project. So at this point, the level of trust is going down. So now what we want to do is begin an examination of the current state. And, this is very easy to do, but often people don't do it. Your need to be a strong leader or be recognized as a smart, capable person takes over, and you jump into Mr. Fix-It mode, or you're looking for an immediate solution, and so you kind of gloss over the current state. So this is a good place to slow down and start asking really basic current state questions. So, the question we're asking is, where are we at right now? How is our project going? And what is the challenge that is stopping us? So this is a good place to bring in some really basic skills like listening and being curious and exploring the current state, which again, it's very simple, but it takes a certain mindset and talent to do this well. Okay, so now we're exploring trust, and there's as a leader, you want results. So if you don't get those results, it's only natural that you're going to have some kind of reaction, usually an emotional reaction. So this is where the business of trust gets a little tricky, because on one hand, you've made a promise to produce those results. You're committed to producing those results. And on the other hand, you need to bring a certain relaxed okayness to your ability to examine the current state. So if you can do this, if you can somehow slow down and just be curious, I'm really curious, where exactly are we at right now? And what exactly is slowing the project down? And again, a lot of leaders rush through trust, whereas what you really need to do is slow down and kind of relax and hang out in trust for a little while. Okay, so we're examining the current state, and this brings you back to the present. The current state takes place in the present moment. I mean, that's kind of blindingly obvious, but the current state is in the moment now. So you have to come back to the now. You may have had a bunch of expectations for how you thought it was going to go or how you wanted it to go, and you have to put those aside so you can actually examine the real results that you have right now. And so this begins the journey. If you can do this well, say you're working with a team, even a couple minutes of this allows people to relax. And in that process, people can kind of put aside the judgment, put aside the expectations, and come back to a observational relationship with the present moment or the present results. Okay, so now we're beginning our journey up the mountain, and we're starting to ask those questions, what do we want? Or what is the strategy to produce results? Now, this is a tricky one because, most companies are based on the principle or the traditional model that the senior people set the strategy, the middle level managers manage that execution of that strategy, and the frontline workers do the actual work. There's nothing wrong with this approach, but we live in a time of accelerating change. We live in a time of accelerating complexity, and no one person at the top of a pyramid can hold all of the wisdom or knowledge in order to create that comprehensive shift. So you have to involve people throughout the organization, and defining that strategy or defining that goal is often much more difficult than it appears. So this is really the beginning of the Q model strategic conversation. Because, look, you could be saying, hey, we want to have a digital transformation in our company, or we want to execute a plan, or we want to produce this result. But this brings in a little paradox. If you don't have a realistic plan to produce that result, it's hard to create a strong vision or to perceive it as achievable, right? So you need to, on one hand, have a realistic plan, and on the other hand, have a strong goal. And those two things can seem mutually exclusive. So, what happens at a lot of organizations is that one by one, people introduce breakthrough ideas, and then one by one, people reject them as not realistic. So you need to suspend your disbelief to explore those basic questions of what do we want to achieve, what is the strategy to get there, and how can we begin to build a realistic plan. And you might have multiple scenarios or multiple strategies that you have to chew through. So this can be an iterative process. So, this is very much something you can do in a couple hours sitting down with a small committed team. But working at a larger company level or in an organization, this usually can take a couple weeks or a couple months. Now, I want to point something out. As you move up this triangle, you automatically move toward alignment. So alignment is a byproduct of the Q model. And in some ways, this is even more valuable than the breakthrough or transformational results you get, because as a team works through those issues, they naturally start to align. Now, this is a little tricky because we operate in a world where most leaders will automatically say they're aligned. In order to be perceived as a team player, you have to say, yes, we are an aligned team. But, in my work as a executive transformation consultant, one of the first things I always do is pull all the executives aside individually and ask them what they think the best strategy or plan is. And you always get radically different ideas. You also get a lot of idea ownership. So you get people saying, my idea is the best, or we should do this and we shouldn't do that. So can you see this naturally creates a situation where you have a set of strategies that are competing for a limited resource? And that limited resource is usually focus. An organization has a limited amount of focus, and the people at the top are telling the people below what to focus on. And if you have competition between ideas or strategies, then you kind of get a zero sum as those strategies cancel each other out. So alignment is critical. So beginning this journey toward vision is a really critical process that takes some time and has to be well managed. Now, a lot of people ask me, what is vision exactly? I mean, if you are a scientist and you say, you take apart the brain, there is no vision part of the brain. Vision is a function of the brain, and there is a visual spatial region of the brain, but what exactly is this thing you call vision? So in the world of Q, we talk about vision in a really specific way, which is an internal picture in your mind where you see an image of success. So this could be a picture in your mind's eye where you're actually looking at an image of success. But conversely, it also could be some kind of strategy or map that you've put on a piece of paper. And when you look at that map, overall, the map seems realistic or doable, and you can imagine that you can implement that plan successfully. So we're talking about a success-based focus, and that you may have to work through several different strategies or several different approaches, but that at some point on the process, if the process is managed well, leaders or a set of people on a team will naturally align on the most effective strategy or solution. So this is the world of vision. It's a very specific term, but vision fundamentally defines high performance. As you move toward a clear vision of something that you want to achieve in the future, performance naturally increases. And this is something that has been tested a lot. If you go back to sports psychology, this is the fundamental idea of sports psychology. And during the 80s, there was a fair amount of research on this. And the number that kept coming up was about 30%. If an athlete has a clear picture in their mind of all of the steps leading towards success, their performance would tend to improve by about 30%. So this absolutely applies in the context of producing a business transformation or a breakthrough in the strategic results of a company. So we're going up to the world of vision, and of course now we need to get down to the world of action. And of course, humans are governed by a lack of time, and everyone can run around being busy and looking like they're producing results while really nothing is happening. And, Harvard Business Review did a wonderful study of 10,000 leaders, and they found that essentially 87% of leaders function in this manner. They're basically running around, looking very busy, but not actually producing many results. EY did a similar study, and they found that 9% of executives or leaders effectively function in a strategic way. So they're looking at a goal or they're looking at an outcome, and they're moving toward that outcome in a systematic way, which leaves the other 91% of the managers and leaders doing what? Doing a lot of action and looking busy. So that's not the kind of busy we want. So we want to translate the vision into a specific set of actions or an implementation process or a plan. And look, this is challenging. It's a challenging thing to do. In fact, most business leaders are very good at coming up with a vision of a desired state and very poor at consistently translating that down into a realistic implementation plan. The other thing you have to say is that while you could have a general strategy for an entire business that you could articulate in a couple paragraphs, translating that down through the layers of a company requires a lot of work. So you could define that as a set of breakthrough projects that extend throughout an organization and actually translate that broad global strategy into a specific set of actionable projects where you can measure the result and track the progress through time. So this is what we call strategic implementation, and it's probably one of the weakest areas for most business leaders. So translating the vision down into action and building out that strategic implementation process is a very challenging thing to do. But the most important thing is to approach it with the Q mindset. You know, the basic idea is that projects have a default state, which is behind schedule and over budget. So if you kind of approach a project with that context in mind, you know that there will be a challenge and the challenge will throw the project off track. Then you're going to start from the right place because you're assuming and building challenge or dealing with those challenges into the plan. It's kind of like that budget for miscellaneous. You know, you really need to put some thought into that, into the what could go wrong, and design a comprehensive plan to deal with it. But look, as Mike Tyson says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, which is another way of saying you can't do it at the front end. There's no way you can make a plan comprehensive enough to deal with all of the stuff that's coming back. So this is why the Q model is really a cycle. So just to turn it into a cycle, you're going to be executing a set of projects, and as you go through that project, every day or every week, you'll reiteratively be coming back to this model and asking those three fundamental questions. In regard to our breakthrough project, where are we at right now? What's the actual current state? Based on that, what do we want to get? Now, this is another good one because when you hit a problem, you go from our goal is a big result to our goal is dealing with whatever is stopping the forward movement of the project. So you could consider that to be a sub-project. And refocusing on that sub-project is really the only way to deal with those challenges that are inevitably going to come up in the project cycle. So then now we're moving down to action. And of course, humans are really good at building big to-do lists with endless actions on them. So the most important question is, what is the most important action? What's the one thing we can do to get that project back on track? And of course, people tend to build big actions that are hard to do. So the next question is, what can we actually achieve in the next 7 days? This is a bit like the classic Scrum question. You know, what can we achieve in our 7-day sprint? So we're saying, what is the one action that we can actually achieve in the next 7 days to get that project back on track, which takes us forward 7 days and we begin the cycle again. So again, the Q model is just so simple. You could really compare it to something like SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, threat, which is just the most basic universal business tool. Business leaders can use this everywhere, and they do because it really works. Another good example would be SMART. You can ask SMART questions to refine your thinking or refine a goal. So the Q is just the same. It's three basic questions. Where are we at now? Where do we want to get to? And what is the next action? But within each of those three questions is an entire domain of transformational thinking. So this is really the magic of Q, is that it is a fundamentally transformational model. So welcome to the Q model.